All right, so today we're diving into a book review. And not just any book review. We're looking at Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Yeah, a Sidney Sheldon thriller.
Oh, a
A
classic.
classic, you got it.
Yeah.
But this reviewer, well, they found it a real page-turner, as you'd expect from Sheldon.
Right.
But they had some, let's just say, interesting criticisms.
Interesting. Okay, I'm intrigued. What did they say?
Well, to kick things off, they said the main conflict felt a bit like technology versus luck.
Technology versus luck. That's an interesting way to put it.
Yeah, I thought so too. Almost like it oversimplifies things a bit, you know?
Yeah, I see what they mean. Like, you've got this high-tech corporation going up against individuals who seem to rely more on, well, chance.
Exactly. So, does that make the story less suspenseful? What do you think?
Well, I mean, Sheldon is known for his fast-paced action, right? Like, the plot twists and turns are kind of his thing.
True, true. So maybe it's not so much about realism as it is about that Sheldon-esque thrill ride.
You got it. Now, here's another thing the reviewer mentioned. The ending. Oh, yeah. What about it?
They described it as kindness wins. Now tell me, does that sound like a typical Sidney Sheldon thriller ending to you?
Kindness wins. Not really, no. I mean, usually there's a showdown or a chase or something, right?
Exactly. So it definitely makes you wonder how that plays out in this kind of story. I mean, it makes me kind of want to read it just to find out, you know?
Right. It's like the vagueness itself is almost like a hook.
Absolutely. Speaking of unexpected things, the reviewer also wasn't too happy about the protagonists falling into a pretty obvious trap.
Oh, yeah. They said they saw that coming a mile away, like a classic too dumb to live situation.
Which can be frustrating, yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
So is that like a forgivable plot device, or does it just completely undermine the characters?
That's a tough one. I mean, on the one hand, you need something to move the plot forward, right?
Right, right.
But on the other hand, you don't want the characters to seem completely clueless.
It's a delicate balance, I guess.
Exactly. And it seems like maybe Sheldon tipped the scales a bit too far in this case. Now, here's where things get really interesting. The reviewer wasn't sure if the role of the women in the story was like an intentional choice or just a flaw.
Oh, this is getting good.
Yeah.
So we start with these three women taking on this powerful corporation, which sounds awesome.
Right.
But then one of them is eliminated pretty early on,
Yeah.
and the other two are kind of just reacting to the antagonist.
Yeah, the reviewer specifically mentioned a scene where one of the women is basically just waiting for things to happen around her, which, not exactly empowering.
So was Sheldon trying to be subversive, like challenging the typical thriller tropes?
Or does he just not quite deliver on the promise of strong female characters? It's hard to say.
It really is. I guess that's where understanding Sheldon's style comes in, right?
Absolutely. And the reviewer does acknowledge Sheldon's skill as a writer, like his fast-paced style, how he shows emotions through actions rather than just telling us.
Yeah, that's true. But they also point out that this sometimes comes at the expense of character development.
Right. So maybe that explains why the women's roles felt a little underdeveloped.
Possibly. It seems like Sheldon tends to prioritize the plot over nuanced character arcs.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. You get the thrills, but maybe not the deep emotional connections.
Which brings us to the reviewer's recommendation. And get this, they basically say, avoid it if you can, but still a page-turner.
So what, like a guilty pleasure?
Exactly. It might not be high art, but it still delivers that Sheldon entertainment factor.
Yeah, that classic can't put it down feeling.
So we're saying Are You Afraid of the Dark is kind of a flawed but enjoyable read.
I think that's a pretty good summary, yeah.
Okay, so maybe not his best, but possibly still worth checking out.
Yeah.
I guess it depends on what you're looking for in a thriller.
Right.
But hey, that's what these deep dives are all about.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've established that Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Might be a bit of a mixed bag.
It does seem that way.
Right. But let's dig into that kindness wins ending a little more.
Oh yeah, that really stuck with me. Me too. I mean, it's not your typical thriller ending, is it?
Not at all. Usually you'd expect like a big confrontation or a chase scene.
Yeah, good overcoming evil, but with like action and stuff.
Exactly. But here, it's kindness that prevails.
Which makes you wonder how Sheldon pulls that off.
Right. Like, how does that even work in a thriller? The reviewer doesn't give too much away.
Which I gotta say makes me even more curious.
Oh, no, absolutely. It's like a little extra hook to make you want to read it.
Definitely. Okay, so let's switch gears for a second and go back to that obvious trap thing.
Yeah, the protagonists not exactly being the sharpest tools in the shed.
Right.
Yeah.
Why do you think that bothers readers so much?
I think it's about, like, feeling cheated almost.
Cheated.
Yeah, like you're invested in the story, you're on the edge of your seat,
Right.
and then the characters do something totally dumb and ruin all that tension.
It's like the author thinks we won't notice or care.
Exactly. And it takes you right out of the story. Instead of worrying about what'll happen, you're just annoyed.
Yeah, I get that. Okay, so big question time. Is this book actually worth reading?
That's a tough one. It really depends on what you're looking for as a reader.
Okay, so break it down for us. What kind of reader would enjoy this book?
Someone who loves a fast-paced plot, lots of twists and turns, that kind of thing.
So, maybe not someone looking for deep characters or themes.
Probably not. This seems more like a pure escapist read, you know?
Just dive in and enjoy the ride.
Exactly. But even if this particular Sheldon book isn't for you, there are tons of other thrillers out there.
That's true. Always more books to explore.
Absolutely.
So we've really dug into Are You Afraid of the Dark? And yeah, it might not be Sheldon's best work, but
It sounds like it still delivers on the thrills, though, right?
right. It's got that classic Sheldon feel. You know what else the reviewer said?
What's that?
That knowing a book's flaws ahead of time, it can actually make you enjoy it more.
Really? That's interesting. Seems kind of counterintuitive.
Right. Like, wouldn't it be better to go in blind?
Yeah, you'd think so.
But think about it. Knowing Sheldon's style, his love for plot twists and fast pacing,
Right.
it kind of sets you up with the right expectations.
Yeah, I see what you mean. So, like, when something unbelievable happens, you're not as thrown off.
Exactly. You're like, okay, that's just Sheldon doing his thing.
It's like, knowing the rules of a game before you start playing.
That's a great analogy.
Right. You might know what to expect, but you can still enjoy the game.
Totally. So with Are You Afraid of the Dark? You can just relax and enjoy the ride, even if it's a little bumpy.
Exactly. Embrace the flaws, focus on the fun.
I like that. So I guess what we're saying is, when you pick up a book, especially by an author you know,
Yeah.
think about their strengths and weaknesses beforehand.
Like, what are their trademarks? What do they always do?
Yeah, that way you might actually appreciate the book on a whole new level.
Even if it's not, like, a perfect book.
Exactly. It's about that active reading, engaging with the text, thinking critically.
And maybe having a little more fun along the way.
Exactly. So to wrap up our deep dive into Are You Afraid of the Dark? We leave you with this.
Hit us with it.
Does knowing a book's flaws actually make you want to read it more?
That's a good question.
Food for thought as you continue your reading adventures.
And remember, even in the most flawed stories, there's always something to discover.
Till next time, happy reading, everyone.
Happy reading.